The winter afternoon in 1978 pressed against the windows of Donovan's Grill on West Cermak Road, Chicago, the kind of that turned the breath of every passing streetcar into a small white ghost. Inside, the smell of pot roast and coffee hung thick enough to taste, and the radiator clanked in the corner like an old man clearing his throat. Mabel Smith pushed the heavy oak door open with her hip, one hand wrapped tight around the small mittened fingers of her son, the other clutching a worn vinyl purse that had once been her mother's. The bells above the door jingled twice. Will was 6 years old. He remembered the warmth first, then the shame. A woman in a starched white apron walked toward them from behind the counter. A woman with pinned silver hair and pearl earrings, and a smile that died the moment her eyes traveled from Mabel's face down to her coat. The coat was a Sears wool blend, navy, frayed at the cuffs where Mabel had darned it twice. Donovan's Grill was the kind of place where the cuffs of every other woman's coat were lined with mink, and the place where you put yours was a brass rack near the window. Mabel didn't have time to take hers off. The woman in the apron, Madeline Donovan, was already speaking. "We don't seat folks like you in the dining room, sweetheart. Delivery entrance is around the back." Mabel's hand tightened on Will's mittened one, but her voice didn't shake. "I came for a bowl of soup. My boy and I just want to warm up." Madeline Donovan looked at the small dining room, at the 4 occupied tables and the 7 empty ones, and shook her head as if she were turning down a beggar she felt sorry for. "We're at capacity, ma'am. You can try the deli down on Halsted. They serve everybody there." The bells jingled twice again on the way out. Mabel did not let her son see her face until they were 3 blocks east, sitting on a wooden bench under the L tracks, the cold steel of the rail above them humming with an arriving train. Then she sat down beside Will. She did not cry until they were home. 48 years later, the penthouse office at 1600 South Michigan Avenue looked out at the Chicago skyline through a wall of glass that caught the morning sun in slabs. 2 coffees cooled on a black walnut desk that had once been a workbench in a Bronzeville garage, refinished by a craftsman in Pilsen at Will's quiet insistence. Adele Whitmore stepped through the door at 7:04 a.m. without knocking. She had stopped knocking 11 years ago. Around the same time, she had started bringing him the things he needed before he asked for them. Today, she carried a manila folder that was thicker than usual, and a face that was thinner. "You need to read these today," she said. Will Smith was 54 years old, broad-shouldered in the way of a man who had once carried sacks of cornmeal up 4 flights of stairs for a living. His hair was cropped short, the salt in it gaining on the pepper. He wore a charcoal cardigan over a plain white tee, dark jeans, and the same Timex Easy reader his mother had given him for his high school graduation in 1990. No Rolex, no Patek. He had owned a Patek once for 91 days before deciding it embarrassed him. He opened the folder. 28 Yelp reviews. 4 months. The Greenwood District flagship in Tulsa, Oklahoma. The second restaurant he had ever opened. The one he had cut the ribbon for in September 2005, with his mother standing beside him. 2 months before the strokes began, that would slow her right side for the rest of her life. The reviews were the same review, written 28 times by 28 different people. The hostess made me wait 40 minutes while 3 white couples walked in after me and got seated. The bartender rolled her eyes when I asked about the pork belly. I'm a 76-year-old woman, and the manager made me feel like I was bothering her by ordering. "I will never come back," I cried in the car. "We'll close the folder." "How long has Reginald been on flagship?" 2 years and 3 months. Pull the customer satisfaction scores across all 32 locations. Adele had them already. She slid a single sheet across the walnut. The Greenwood District flagship was dead last, 42nd percentile. 2 of the locations that beat it were in markets 1/5 the size. He stared at the sheet for the length of 3 slow breaths. Then he picked up the phone. Reginald Mayfield answered on the third ring, his voice already smoothed for company. "Mr. Smith, to what do I owe the pleasure, sir?" Will kept his tone level. 28 Yelp reviews in 4 months, Reginald, all saying the same thing about your front of house. Walk me through it. There was a pause. The pause of a man who had rehearsed the answer before the question existed. "Mr. Smith, Yelp is, with all due respect, noise. People leave bad reviews when they eat a dessert. My staff is strong. Numbers are hitting target. Customer satisfaction is dead, last out of 32. Sir, those surveys are subjective. We can't control how every customer feels. We'll let the silence sit." He knew that voice. It was the voice of a man who had built a wall of policy between himself and the truth. "Appreciate your time, Reginald." He hung up. That night he drove to Tulsa alone. He took the silver Chevy Silverado he kept in the basement garage for hauling lumber to the community workshop he sponsored in Bronzeville. 583 miles, 10 hours and 40 minutes on Interstate 44, 2 stops for coffee in Springfield and Joplin. He pulled onto Greenwood Avenue at 11:47 p.m. and parked across the street from the dark brick storefront with the neon Magnolia and Sons sign humming in green and gold. Through the front windows, he could see the dining room half cleaned. 2 women in black aprons were laughing at something on a phone screen, leaning on a table. An older black man in a tan coat stood at the to-go counter holding a paper ticket. He had been standing there at least the 4 minutes Will had been watching. Neither woman looked up. Will gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles ached. He drove 2 blocks east to the La Quinta Inn on Detroit Avenue, paid cash for 2 nights, sat on the edge of the queen bed in room 214, and dialed Adele at 5:42 a.m. "I need an identity, Adele. Transfer from the Detroit location. Name Marvin Booker. Position custodial and maintenance. Night and morning shifts. Start Wednesday. Make sure not a single soul in that building knows. How long do you want to be under?" 6 days. Then conference room. No dining room. Saturday morning, 7 a.m. Every employee present. She did not ask if he was sure. She had stopped asking that around year 8. "Marvin Booker will be in the system in 40 hours. Will hung up, walked to the bathroom mirror, and looked at the man inside it. Then he reached up to the top shelf of the closet, pulled down the small canvas duffel he had not used in years, and started laying out the only clothes that mattered now. A pair of khakis, a faded blue polo, a Cubs cap that had belonged to his father. Tomorrow he was going home to the one place that had been failing his mother all along. Wednesday morning, 6:15 a.m. The alley behind Magnolia and Son's kitchen on Greenwood Avenue smelled of cold grease and wet cardboard, the kind of smell that lived behind every restaurant in every city in America, and that nobody in any dining room ever wanted to think about. Will Smith parked the Silverado 2 spots down from a green dumpster, killed the engine, and sat for a long 10 seconds listening to the truck tick as it cooled. His khakis had a coffee stain on the right thigh that he had put there on purpose with a paper cup at the La Quinta. The Cubs cap was pulled low. He carried a tin lunchbox that held a turkey sandwich, a Honeycrisp apple, and absolutely nothing he intended to eat. He took a breath, opened the door, and stepped out as Marvin Booker. The employee entrance was a steel door painted brown a long time ago. The paint had peeled in 3 places, and somebody had taped a handwritten sign over the keypad reading, "Punch in before coffee, not after. Signed, Management." Will pressed the code Adele had texted him, 4792, and the lock clicked. Inside, the back hallway smelled different than the alley. Yeast and butter and onions, sautéing in something dark, the kind of smell that pulled a man straight back to his mother's kitchen in 1979. The door at the end of the hallway swung open. A woman stepped out, wiping flour off her forearms with a black bar towel. She was somewhere in her early 30s, medium height, deep brown skin, hair pulled back in tight bantu knots under a black bandana. Her chef's coat had her name embroidered in gold thread above the left chest pocket, Janelle. Beneath it, in smaller letters, sous. She looked up, scanned Will from cap to boots in one cool pass, and held out a hand. You, Marvin? Yes, ma'am. Janelle Boudreau. I'm the sous chef. Reginald's not in until 8, so for the next 2 hours, the building belongs to me, the dishwasher, and the line cooks. You report to me until he gets here. Her grip was firm and quick, the grip of a woman who had stopped wasting time being polite a long time ago. Rules. Hood vents go on by 6:30 or the inspector writes us up. Floor cleaning rig is in the closet marked 3, not the closet marked 1. The closet marked 1 is the cutting board rinse station, and if you mix bleach with what's in there, I will personally walk you out the back door. Lids for the to-go containers are on shelf D, not shelf A. Shelf A is sugar packets, and shelf A being out of sugar packets at 7 a.m. is what makes our regulars walk. She paused, looked at him again. You did custodial in Detroit? Yes, ma'am. 11 months. Why'd you transfer? Will had rehearsed this. My sister moved down for a teaching job. I'm helping out with her kids on weekends. Janelle nodded once, the way a person nods when they have decided to believe you for now and not forever. All right. Start with the dining room floor. Front of house staff comes in at 9:30. I want the floor mopped and dry before then. Do not, under any circumstances, mop where Brianna is standing. She'll find a reason that's your fault. She turned and walked back into the kitchen. Will pulled a yellow rolling bucket out of closet 3 and got to work. 6:45 a.m., the first customer pushed through the front door. Otis Pemberton was 71 years old, walked with the deliberate slowness of a man whose knees had carried him through 3 decades of standing room blues clubs in Kansas City and Memphis. His coat was tan wool, the collar worn shiny at the back from years of being turned up against November wind. He stopped just inside the door, looked toward the to-go counter where no one was standing, and then toward the dining room. Janelle's voice came from the kitchen pass before any cashier could speak. Mr. Otis, window booth, black coffee, hot, no sugar, cornbread. Otis tipped his cap once at the pass and walked himself to the second booth on the left, the one closest to the morning light. Will watched from his mop bucket while Janelle came around the line, poured the coffee herself into a thick white mug, and carried it out with both hands. She set it down in front of Otis with both hands, the way her grandmother had taught her in Lake Charles when she was 11. Glad you came in this morning, Mr. Otis. Cornbread is 2 minutes. Thank you, baby. That was the whole exchange. Will mopped a slow circle around an empty foretop and didn't look up. He felt something inside his chest that he had not felt in a long time. It was the feeling of being seen treating someone right when no one with money was watching. That feeling lasted exactly until 10:06 a.m. The front door chimed, and Brianna Holcomb walked in laughing into her phone, a venti iced coffee from somewhere not Magnolia in her left hand. She was 27 years old, 5'4", a sharp face under a sharper bob, full red lipstick already applied for a shift that hadn't started yet. Tasha Crenshaw came in 3 steps behind her, 24, taller, chewing gum and scrolling. The temperature of the dining room dropped 4 degrees the moment they crossed the threshold. The line cooks behind the pass stopped joking. The dishwasher turned his music down. Janelle, who had been crouched in front of the lowboy reading a thermometer, stood up, said nothing, and walked back into the kitchen. Brianna saw Will mopping near the host stand. She stopped, looked at him, looked at the bucket, looked at him again. Who are you? Marvin Booker, custodial. Why are you mopping in the front of house at 10 o'clock in the morning? We open at 11. Reginald asked me to finish before. Reginald doesn't run front of house. I run front of house. Take the bucket to the back hallway and don't come up here again during open hours. We have a brand to maintain." She turned to Tasha. "Did you ever notice the back hallway has its own entrance? Some people seem to forget that." Tasha laughed without looking up from her phone. Will nodded once, the same once Janelle had nodded earlier, and pushed the bucket through the swinging doors into the back. He went, but he listened. The next customer through the front door was a young white couple in matching North Face vests. Brianna lit up like a stage lamp. "Hey babes, welcome to Magnolia. Have y'all tried the autumn pecan old-fashioned? Tasha just shook it up yesterday. It is dangerous." She walked them to a window booth herself, the same window booth where Otis Pemberton was finishing his coffee. Otis stood up, leaving $3 under his saucer the way he always did, and stepped past Brianna without her acknowledging him. The hostess seated the couple before he was fully out the door. Will, standing just inside the swinging kitchen door, watched the booth become someone else's 8 seconds after Otis vacated it. He watched Otis's $3 sit untouched on the table, while Brianna asked the couple what kind of bourbon they liked. Then the second customer came in. She was Latina, mid-50s, wearing a pale blue Marriott housekeeping uniform, with a brass name tag reading Rosario. She held a takeout slip in her hand from the corporate Magnolia app. Brianna saw her, turned her back, and pretended to wipe down the host's stand. 42 seconds. Will counted. The woman shifted her weight from one foot to the other, her face slowly closing in the way faces close when they have learned a kind of math. Tasha finally walked over from the bar. "Pick up?" "Yes, please." Tasha disappeared into the kitchen, came back with a paper bag, slid it across the counter without making eye contact, and walked back to the bar. The woman opened her bag, checked the order, and walked out without a thank you because no one had given her one to return. Will stood in the kitchen doorway with his mop in his hands and his jaw locked tight. Janelle came up beside him, untying her apron strings to retie them tighter. She did not look at him as she spoke. "You see her every Tuesday and Thursday, Rosario. She buys lunch for the housekeeping crew at the Marriott. $118 order every time on her own card. The tip on her last 14 orders averaged 19%. She paused, scraped a fleck of dough off her thumb with her index nail. "She's never once been thanked at the counter." She walked back to the line. Will mopped the back hallway for the next 20 minutes without raising his eyes. But he was counting. Thursday morning, 11:42 a.m. The lunch rush at Magnolia and Sons started early in Tulsa because the courthouse 3 blocks south let out for lunch at 11:30, and by 12:05 every booth in the dining room was full. Will pushed his mop bucket along the narrow service hallway between the kitchen and the bar, head down, ears wide open. He had learned in less than 36 hours that the best way to disappear in a restaurant was to wear a cap and carry something dirty. People looked through him the way they looked through a coat rack. That was the only reason he heard what came next. Tasha Crenshaw was leaning over the service well at the bar, polishing a coupe glass with a microfiber cloth, her voice low enough to feel private and loud enough to carry. Brianna was on the other side of the well, restocking cocktail napkins, half smiling at her phone screen. The radio above the bar was playing Maxwell at 15% volume. Will's mop was 4 feet from the bar. "You see how Janelle was hovering over the new janitor yesterday?" Tasha's voice. Brianna laughed. "I noticed. She gives me Mexican grandmother energy with these grown men coming in off the street. Like, girl, you are sous chef. You are not a social worker. I heard him say he transferred from Detroit. Detroit didn't transfer him. Detroit fired him, and corporate is too lazy to check references." Tasha laughed. "I'm just saying. Dude looks like he sleeps in that truck out back." Brianna lowered her voice an extra notch. "Watch your purse around him. I'm serious. Detroit has a reputation." Will did not move. He kept mopping the same 6-inch square of grout he had already cleaned twice. He was 54 years old. He had heard versions of this conversation about himself for 48 of those years, starting in 1978 on West Cermak Road. He had heard it from a guidance counselor at his Chicago Public High School in 1986, who told him not to apply to Northwestern. He had heard it from a loan officer at Cole Taylor Bank in 1998, who told him the West Side wasn't ready for a sit-down restaurant. He had heard it from a Greenwich landlord in 2004, who took 2 months to review his application and then leased the space to a frozen yogurt franchise. What was different today was that this was his own house. Brianna kept talking. Reginald so weak. He let Cornell tell him to put this guy on a Wednesday start. Cornell does that on purpose. Sends us the strays so I have to manage them off the floor. Why doesn't Cornell just put them in the back? He thinks we're a soup kitchen now. Whatever. He'll be by tomorrow. I'll talk to him. She slid her phone into the apron pocket. Pull me a Sansere, the courthouse table 4 asked. Tasha pulled it. Brianna lifted the glass off the well and turned without looking, and the glass tipped in her hand, and a third of the Sansere arsed out and hit the hallway tile 6 inches from Will's left boot. Then she looked up. She looked surprised, the kind of surprised a person practices in a mirror. Marvin. Her voice changed pitch, loud enough to reach 2 booths. Marvin, I am literally carrying a glass for a guest, and you have the floor slick right where I'm walking. Look at this. Look at it. Will looked. The puddle was the size of a saucer. The hallway was dry everywhere else. Get this up. Now, before a customer slips, and next time you mop a service path, you put down a cone. She paused, tilted her head. Do you understand English, Marvin? The dining room held its breath the way a dining room holds its breath when something embarrassing is happening that nobody wants to be associated with. Will set the mop against the wall, knelt down with a dry bar towel, and pressed it into the wine spreading across the grout. The wine had soaked into the unfinished joints between the tiles, the way red wine always did, and he knew from 23 years of opening restaurants that grout that color would have to be bleached and resealed by Sunday, or it would stain for the life of the floor. He pressed the towel down. The smell of the Sancerre rose around him, citrus and gunflint and minerality. A $400 bottle, retail. He recognized it because he had personally approved its addition to the wine list in 2022. Brianna stood over him with the half-empty glass. A booth opened up at the front window, and Otis Pemberton walked in for the second time that day. Otis was a creature of routine. Black coffee at 6:45, then home to write in his composition notebook, then back at lunch on Thursdays for the smothered chicken, because his late wife Loretta had loved it. He took his seat at the window booth, hung his tan coat over the back of the chair, and looked across the dining room at the man in the Cubs cap on his knees with a bar towel. Otis did not look away. Janelle came out of the kitchen carrying a buspan because the new busser was on his 15-minute. She saw Will on the floor. She saw Brianna standing over him with the glass tilted. She saw the wine. She set the buspan down on an empty foretop, walked the 8 feet between them, knelt down on the tile next to Will, and pulled a clean rag from the apron tied around her waist. Brianna's voice climbed half an octave. Janelle, you are the sous chef. Why are you on the floor right now? Janelle did not look up. I'm helping a coworker. He doesn't need help. He needs to learn the job. He's learning the job, Brianna. I'm helping a coworker. She pressed the rag into the wine alongside Will's towel. Her shoulder touched his shoulder for half a second. She did not look at him. She did not need to. Go take the Sancerre to table 4 before it gets warm. They're waiting. Brianna stood there for 3 seconds, the empty glass in her hand. Then she turned and walked toward the dining room, and the moment her back was turned, Janelle reached into her apron, pulled a folded piece of paper out, and slid it under Will's left palm. She squeezed his wrist once, stood up, took the buspan, walked back to the kitchen. Will finished the wine, carried the soaked towels to the laundry hamper in the back, and locked himself into the single-occupancy staff bathroom for 90 seconds. He unfolded the paper Janelle had passed him. It was a photograph, printed on plain office paper, of a small notebook page covered in handwriting. At the top of the page, someone had written in a careful block hand, "Brand fit, brand not fit." On the left column were 6 entries with hearts. Tech guy James always tips 22%. Couple JJ and Kara, Instagram. Realtor Christine, brunch table. On the right column were 11 entries with X's. Otis, slow drinker. Rosario Marriott crew, no eye contact. Lady with the twin boys, messy table. Cleaning uniform Latina, doesn't tip. The handwriting was identical to the dry erase Brianna had used yesterday to write the soup of the day. Beneath the photograph, in Janelle's handwriting, 3 words in pencil. Found it Tuesday. Will stared at the paper for a long time. Then he folded it back into quarters, slipped it into the lining of his Cubs cap, washed his hands, and walked back out onto the floor to mop the rest of the hallway. At the front window, Otis Pemberton was still watching him over the rim of a coffee cup. Their eyes met for exactly 1 second. Otis nodded. Will nodded. And the two men, separated by 20 feet of dining room, and 40 years of being treated like furniture, said nothing at all. By the time Will clocked out at 3:12 p.m., he had photographed 6 more things on his personal phone. The schedule, pinned to the break room wall. The tip pool envelope in the manager's drawer. The signed Cornell Vaughn Quarterly Innovation Report taped to the corkboard behind the prep line. The dishwasher's pay stub he had spotted in the trash, ripped in half. The dining room camera that had been disabled 6 months ago. The line item on the inventory sheet marked comp meals, staff family discount that had ballooned from 18 meals in March to 141 in October. The last one was the most expensive question Will had asked yet. He drove back to the La Quinta. He sent the photographs to Adele. Then he sat on the edge of the bed in room 214, took the folded paper out of the cap, and looked at the right column one more time. Otis, Rosario, lady with twin boys, cleaning uniform Latina, 11 entries, 11 people, 11 Marvin Bookers. He did not eat dinner that night. Friday afternoon, 3:14 p.m. The dining room at Magnolia & Sons was working through the slow stretch between lunch and happy hour, the hour when the courthouse crowd had cleared and the early dinner reservations had not yet arrived. 6 tables held lingering guests. The bar held a single man in a charcoal sport coat, working through a glass of bourbon and a stack of legal pads. Above the host stand, the ceiling speakers played Bill Withers at a volume soft enough to feel respectful. Then the front door opened and the temperature changed. Cornell Vaughn was 49 years old, 6'2", a sharp goatee shaped along the jaw with the kind of precision that only came from a barber appointment every 9 days. He wore a charcoal theory suit with no tie, a white pocket square, and brown Allen Edmonds wingtips. The cologne entered the dining room before he did. Tom Ford Tobacco Vanille, the kind of cologne a man wore to be smelled across a room. 2 booths turned their heads. The man with the legal pads looked up from his bourbon and looked back down. Brianna saw him from across the floor, and her whole face changed. Uncle Cornell. She crossed the dining room with both arms open. He met her halfway. The hug was for the staff, not for her. He held it 3 full seconds longer than a normal family hug, his free hand patting her back in a deliberate rhythm, and over her shoulder his eyes scanned the room the way a man scans a room to see who is watching him be loved. He kissed the top of her head. He turned to Tasha at the bar, pointed both index fingers like guns. There she is, the best shaker in Oklahoma. Tasha laughed. Janelle was standing at the kitchen pass holding a ticket. Cornell's eyes passed over her the way a flashlight passes over an empty shelf. He did not say her name. Reginald Mayfield came out of the manager's office, wiping his palms on his slacks. Cornell, wasn't expecting you until next week. I'm here when I'm here, Reggie. Walk me. Reginald walked him. They moved through the dining room slowly, Cornell touching the corner of a tabletop, sliding a fork a quarter inch left so the handle aligned with the napkin edge, lifting a salt shaker and setting it back down. The performance of an inspector who already knew nothing was wrong because he had built the thing he was inspecting. Will was at the front window, on a stepladder, wiping the inside of the plate glass with a microfiber rag and a vinegar spray. The glass had not been cleaned since June. He had pointed this out to Reginald on Wednesday. Reginald had said, "Yes, please get to it." Cornell stopped 6 feet from the stepladder. "Who put him there?" "Reginald. He's our new custodial transfer. From Detroit. He's been working on the windows since lunch let out." "Reggie." Cornell's voice dropped half an octave. "Reggie, look at me. This window faces Greenwood Avenue. People drive by here. Important people. People who decide whether they want to bring their wives in here Saturday night. And you have a man in a stained polo standing on a ladder 6 feet from the entrance during operating hours." Reginald did not answer. Cornell turned to Will. "Hey, you, come down off there." Will came down. He folded the rag once, tucked it into his back pocket, and stood with his hands at his sides. "What's your name?" "Marvin Booker, sir." "From Detroit." "Yes, sir." "Detroit doesn't have transfers, Marvin. Detroit hires its own people. So either you're lying about Detroit or somebody in corporate is doing me a favor by sending you down here." Cornell looked him up and down once, the same up and down Brianna had practiced on Wednesday. "Take that bucket and that ladder out the back hallway and don't come back through the front of house until we close. You hear me?" "Yes, sir." The table by the window had stopped pretending not to listen. Yolanda Carrington was 76 years old. She had been a kindergarten teacher in the Tulsa public school system for 41 years, retired in 2012, and had come to Magnolia and Sons for Friday lunch every week for 19 years, since 6 months after the doors opened. She was a small woman in a lavender cardigan, with a string of pearls her late husband had given her on their 30th anniversary. She had ordered the smothered chicken, eaten 1/3 of it, and had been nursing a glass of sweet tea for the last 22 minutes, while she read a paperback. She closed the book. She placed her napkin on top of the plate. She lifted her purse off the chair beside her, opened it, removed her wallet, and counted 3 20s and a 5 onto the table. $64 on a $47 check. She stood up. She did not look at Cornell. She did not look at Reginald. She did not look at Brianna. She walked past the host stand, past the front window, past Will standing with his bucket and his folded rag, and she paused. She did not turn her head all the way. She spoke just loud enough for him to hear. "Honey, you were doing those windows beautifully." Then she walked out into the November afternoon. The bell over the door jingled twice. The same way it had jingled on West Cermak Road in 1978. Will did not move. He could not afford to move. Cornell waited until the door closed. "Reggie, we are losing 19-year regulars while this man stands on a ladder. Get him out of here. Marvin, give me the ladder and the rag. Out now." Will handed over the ladder, kept the rag, walked past Brianna, who would not meet his eyes, past Tasha, who was openly grinning at her phone, and pushed through the swinging doors into the kitchen. The line cooks parted for him without looking up from their boards. He carried the bucket through the back hallway, out the steel employee door, and into the alley behind the dumpster. He sat down on the concrete loading step. The afternoon sun was already low over the rooftops of Greenwood Avenue, the same avenue where Black Wall Street had burned in 1921. The same blocks where his mother had told him to open a restaurant if he ever opened one in Oklahoma, because dignity had been bought and paid for on that street long before he was born. He sat with the rag in his hand. He looked at the chipped brown paint on the dumpster. He counted to 10. He counted to 20. He took out his personal phone, the one Adele had given him, and dialed her direct line. She answered on the first ring. Will, Saturday. 7 a.m. dining room, not the conference room. Every employee on the flagship roster, no exceptions. Bring the projector, the laptop, the 4 termination folders, and Coltrane Ridge's full report. Make sure their senior auditor is on standby on speaker if anyone tries to challenge the numbers. And Adele. Yes, I want Yolanda Carrington's home address. She lives somewhere off Greenwood. Find her. I'll call her tonight personally. I'll have it in 20 minutes. He hung up. He sat on the loading step for another 6 minutes. Above the dumpster, a single brown leaf detached from the maple tree behind the property line and zigzagged down to land on the toe of his work boot. He watched it sit there. He did not brush it off. The steel employee door opened behind him. Footsteps. He did not turn. The footsteps stopped 6 feet away. He could smell coat wool, old cologne, and pipe tobacco that had not been lit in a week. Otis Pemberton sat down on the loading step beside him. The old man did not speak for a long moment. He pulled a single Marlboro Red out of a pack in his coat pocket, looked at it, put it back without lighting it. I quit 26 years ago, he said. Still carry one, just to remember what it feels like to want something bad. Will did not answer. Otis kept looking at the alley. My wife Loretta used to come in here on Fridays for the smothered chicken too. She passed 2 years ago this December. I keep coming because it was hers. He paused. I've been watching you 3 days, Marvin. You're a quiet man. He turned and looked at Will for the first time. His eyes were the kind of brown that had seen 60 years of being looked through. But you ain't a janitor. Will met his eyes. He did not confirm. He did not deny. He just held the look. Otis nodded once. Slowly. He stood up, brushed the back of his coat off, and walked down the alley toward the side street where his 1997 Buick was parked. Halfway down, he stopped, turned back, and called over his shoulder. Whoever you are, son, whatever you do next. He paused. Make it count for that lady in the lavender sweater. Then he was gone. Will sat alone in the alley until the streetlight at the end of the block clicked on at 5:08 p. Saturday morning, 6:42 a.m. The alley behind Magnolia and Sons was still dark, the kind of November dark that came with frost on the dumpster lid and breath that hung in the air a half-second longer than it should. Will parked the Silverado in the same spot he had parked it all week. He wore the same faded blue polo, the same Cubs cap, the same khakis with the coffee stain on the right thigh he had not bothered to wash. Adele had asked him 3 times on the phone last night whether he wanted to change before the meeting. He had told her no. He let himself in through the employee door at 6:44 a.m. The kitchen was empty. The line was cold. The dishwasher was off. The warming lights were off. The only sound was the slow hum of the walk-in compressor and the soft tick of the gas line settling. He walked through the swinging doors into the dining room, switched on the dimmer for the wall sconces, and brought them up halfway. 84 chairs sat overturned on top of 42 tables, legs in the air. He took down 4 chairs from the 4 top nearest the kitchen pass and set them right side up, slowly, deliberately, the way his father had set up folding chairs at AME church basement dinners in 1975. Then he stopped. He walked the 8 feet to the wall beside the kitchen entrance and stood in front of a framed photograph he had not allowed himself to look at properly in a long time. The frame was simple black walnut. The mat was cream. Inside was a color photograph taken on September 17, 2005, by a freelance photographer named Eugene Whitfield, whose business card was still tucked behind the matting. The photograph showed a 33-year-old black man in a navy suit, mid-cut of a red ribbon, scissors caught at the exact moment the ribbon was about to part. Beside him, a small woman with silver hair pulled back into a low bun, wearing a peach-colored church dress and clutching the man's free hand with both of her own. Her face was bent slightly toward the camera, smiling the smile of a woman who had lived through too much to ever trust joy fully. Beneath the photograph, a small brass plaque, Magnolia and Sons Kitchen, Greenwood District Flagship, opened September 17, 2005. Founded by Will Smith, dedicated to Mabel Smith, who taught me that everybody eats. Will stood there for 30 seconds. He counted, in his head, the number of employees who had walked past this photograph this week without stopping. Brianna, 14 times. Tasha, 11. Reginald, 28. Cornell, 3. Janelle, twice. Both times she had stopped. Both times she had pressed her palm flat against the wall beside the frame for 1 second before continuing into the kitchen. The first time Will had seen her do it, on Wednesday afternoon, he had not understood. He understood now. The bell, the front door, jingled twice. Adele Whitmore walked in carrying a slim leather portfolio under her left arm and a small Epson projector under her right. She wore a charcoal pantsuit, low pumps. No jewelry except a thin gold band on her right ring finger that had belonged to her grandmother in Birmingham. She walked across the dining room to the table he had set up, set the projector down, opened the portfolio, and laid out 4 manila folders side by side. She did not speak. She nodded at him once. He nodded back. By 7:01 a.m., the first employees began arriving. Reginald came in first, his face already pulled tight, his eyes flicking between Will at the table and Adele at the projector. He did not recognize Will yet. He saw only a custodial worker sitting where management should sit, and a strange woman in a suit setting up equipment. Marvin, what are you doing in here?" Will did not answer. Reginald turned to Adele. "Ma'am, can I help you? I'm the general manager." Adele lifted her eyes from her laptop. "Mr. Mayfield, please take a seat. We'll begin in 11 minutes. The line cooks came in next, 4 of them, in flat caps and white coats." They looked at Will, then at the framed photograph on the wall behind him, then back at Will. The youngest of them, a 23-year-old named Devonte Hayes, slowed his step for half a second, and then kept walking to a chair against the side wall. Tasha came in at 7:06, already on her phone. Brianna came in at 7:09, holding an iced oat milk latte from the Starbucks on Peoria, lipstick freshly applied. She walked through the room without looking up. Sat down, crossed her legs, tapped her phone, looked up, saw Will sitting at the head table in the same polo he had been wearing yesterday, frowned. "Marvin, did you not get the memo? This is a management meeting. The cleaning closet is across the hall." Will did not move. Janelle came in at 7:11 a.m. through the kitchen door, untying her bandana, her chef's coat unbuttoned at the throat. She had been there since 5, the way she was there every Saturday. She stopped just inside the dining room. Her eyes traveled from Adele to the projector, to the 4 folders on the table, to Will sitting at the head, to the framed photograph on the wall behind him, and then back to Will. She did not speak. She found a chair against the wall. She sat down. She folded her hands in her lap. Cornell Vaughn came in at 7:13 a.m. He was halfway across the dining room before he registered that the man at the head table was not Reginald. He stopped. His eyes flicked to Adele, then to the 4 folders, then to Will. The recognition was slower than the panic. The panic came first in the small tightening of skin around his eyes. Then the recognition arrived behind it. He looked at the framed photograph on the wall. He looked at the man in the cap. He looked at the photograph again. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. "Sit down, Mr. Vaughn," Adele said. "Please." Cornell sat. Will stood up. He pulled the Cubs cap off his head and set it on the table. The fluorescent house light caught the gray in his cropped hair. He looked around the room slowly, table to table, face to face. He did not look angry. He did not look hurt. He looked like a man who had finally decided to stop being a guest in his own house. "My name is Will Smith. I am the chairman and founder of Magnolia and Sons Kitchen. I cut a red ribbon in front of this building on September 17th, 2005, with my mother Mabel Smith standing beside me. He gestured behind him toward the wall. Every head in the room turned to follow his hand. Every set of eyes landed on the photograph for the first time, really, in a long time. That photograph has been hanging on this wall for 21 years. It is 6 feet from the door I walked through every morning this week, as Marvin Booker, custodial transfer from Detroit. Tasha's phone slipped out of her hand and hit the floor. She did not pick it up. Brianna's hand went to her mouth, slowly, the way a hand goes to a mouth when the body is trying to keep something inside the throat. Her iced latte sweated onto the table beside her. Reginald put both palms flat on his knees and stared at them. Cornell looked at the floor. Janelle in the back of the room did not move. She did not smile. She did not cry. She simply held her chair the way a person holds the hand of someone they have waited a long time to meet. Adele clicked the first slide. The screen, propped against the far wall, lit up. A photograph filled the frame. A folded notebook page photographed in close detail. At the top in block letters, brand fit, brand not fit, 2 columns, hearts and X's. A line of careful handwriting. A name in the right column, Otis, slow drinker. The dining room was very, very quiet. Will let the slide sit. He did not speak over it. He let every employee in the room read it for themselves, for as long as they needed to. He had built this restaurant for a woman who had once been told to use the delivery entrance, and he was not going to rush the people who had forgotten her now. He waited. Adele advanced to the second slide. The screen filled with a bar chart, simple, colored, in 2 shades of green. The header at the top read tip pool distribution, 12-month rolling, Greenwood flagship versus system average, 32 locations. On the left, 2 bars rose to 79 and 21%. On the right, 2 bars rose to 51 and 49. Below the chart, a single line of explanatory text. Front-of-house bartenders and FOH lead retain 79% of pooled tips. Entire back-of-house and remaining FOH staff share 21%. Adele did not narrate the slide. She let it speak. Brianna stared at the floor. Tasha picked her phone up off the tile and put it face down on the table, slowly, like a person setting down a loaded thing. The 2-line cooks against the side wall exchanged a look that contained 10 months of conversations they had been having in low voices in the walk-in. Janelle did not look at the screen. She was looking at Will. Will was looking at the chart. He had personally approved the Magnolia and Sons tip pool policy in 2017. The policy on paper read 50-50 back to front. The policy in this building read what was on the wall right now. Adele clicked. Slide 3. A grid. 6 months of weekly scheduled data for 1 employee. Janelle Boudreau. Every cell shaded in 3 colors. Dawn shifts in red. Closing shifts in red. Midday Tuesdays in red. The grid was almost entirely red. Adele added 1 sentence. Across 32 locations, no other sous chef in the company has been scheduled exclusively in opener and closer slots for more than 3 consecutive weeks. The system flagged Greenwood at week 11. The flag was dismissed by the regional director on November 9th, 2025, with the comment, operational need. Janelle's eyes were bright. She did not blink them clear. She let them be bright. Cornell shifted in his chair. Adele clicked. Slide 4 was 2 columns. The left column was a series of photographs of pages from a small black composition notebook, open to dated entries written in a careful left-handed cursive. Janelle's notebook. Adele had photographed it last night in the kitchen office at Janelle's permission. The entries had dates in the upper right corner of each page. The right column was a series of corporate intranet screenshots of regional innovation submissions, each one signed at the bottom by Cornell Vaughn. Peak-encrusted catfish. Notebook entry, February 9th, 2025. Corporate submission, April 14th, 2025. Sweet tea-brined pork belly. Notebook entry, July 22nd, 2025. Submission, September 18th. Cane syrup cornbread pudding. Notebook entry, November 6th, 2025. Submission, January 11th, 2026. 2 months. Every time, 2 months exactly. The dining room was silent enough to hear the gas line settle behind the kitchen wall. Cornell stared at the side of the projector. He did not look at the screen. He did not look at Janelle. He did not look at Will. His jaw was set in the rigid way of a man who had decided very early in his career never to be the person who flinched first. Will spoke. His voice was even. Cornell, I want you to look at the screen, not at me, at the screen. Cornell did not move. Cornell, look at the screen. Cornell turned his head slowly, the way a man turns his head when he knows that what he is about to see is what everyone else has already seen. He looked at the screen. He kept his face still. But the muscle in his temple moved twice. Pecan-crusted catfish has sold $1.2 million in revenue across 32 locations in the quarter ending September 30th. You received a regional innovation bonus of $47,000 on October 7th for that submission and the 2 that followed. $47,000 that belonged to the woman sitting in the back of this dining room. Cornell did not answer. Adele clicked. Slide 5 was a screenshot from the Magnolia & Sons HR portal, an internal complaint log. 3 rows, each row a complaint filed by Janelle Boudreau, each row a different date in 2025, each row marked resolved, no action required, each row signed by Cornell Vaughn, schedule equity complaint, April 3rd, no action, tip pool transparency complaint, July 19th, no action, recipe attribution complaint, October 14th, no action, 3 complaints, 3 dismissals, same signature, same person, same closed loop. Adele added a single sentence. Per Magnolia and Sons HR Policy, Section 4.2, no employee complaint may be reviewed by the supervisor named in the complaint. All 3 of these reviews were a procedural violation. The youngest line cook against the wall, Devonte Hayes, put his hand over his mouth. Adele clicked. Slide 6. The Magnolia and Sons internal HR record for Brianna Holcomb. Most of the fields were blacked out for privacy. 1 field was visible. Emergency contact. Cornell Vaughn. Relationship uncle. Date of hire, March 14th, 2024. Recommended by Cornell Vaughn. We'll let that slide sit for 10 full seconds. Reginald let out a breath that sounded like a man who had been holding it for a year. Will turned to face the room. He spoke slowly. I want to be clear about something for everyone in this dining room. The decisions you are about to see me make in the next 5 minutes are not personal. They are not vengeance. They are the application of policy that already exists, that this company already pays for, and that one regional director chose to override because the person breaking the policy was related to him. Every executive in this company has a fiduciary duty to apply our standards uniformly. Cornell, you violated that duty 31 separate times in 18 months. Then he turned to Adele. Bring her in. Adele walked to the front door, pulled it open, and held it. A woman in a navy apron and dark jeans stepped through, carrying a slim leather binder. She was in her 48 voice, tall, with steel gray locks pulled into a low knot. Will introduced her without standing. This is Renata Whitlock, Senior Employment Counsel from Coltrane Ridge Consulting in Houston. She and her team completed a third-party operational audit of this location starting Wednesday afternoon. I asked her to be on call this morning to walk us through findings if anyone wishes to challenge them. Renata did not sit down. She opened the binder. On the matter of tip pool integrity, the Fair Labor Standards Act, amended by Congress in March 2018, prohibits employers from retaining any portion of employee tips and prohibits managers and supervisors from participating in tip pools regardless of whether the employer claims a tip credit. Title 29, United States Code, Section 203, subsection M, paragraph 2, subbrac B. The civil penalty for each violation is up to $1,100, and violators are liable for the amount of the tips improperly taken, plus an equal additional amount in liquidated damages, paid directly to affected employees. Coltrane Ridge has identified 47 discrete violations across the 12-month review period at this location. Total estimated exposure to the company, before settlement reductions, $318,214. Cornell finally raised his head. He looked at Renata. He looked at Will. He looked at Brianna, whose hand was still pressed flat against her mouth, mascara now running in two clean black lines down her cheeks. He looked at the framed photograph on the wall, the one of a man and his mother in 2005. Then he looked down at his own hands, palms up in his lap, the way a man looks at his hands when he is trying to remember what they used to be for. Will turned to Janelle. She was already looking at him. Her face was still, the way her grandmother had taught her, the way black women in Lake Charles in 1998 had been teaching their daughters for 200 years. Will spoke directly to her across 40 feet of dining room in front of 14 employees who had stopped pretending this was a meeting and started understanding it was a reckoning. Janelle, I've been the chairman of this company for 21 years. You have been a sous chef in this building for 5. I have a corner office in Chicago. You have a notebook. The company we both work for has until this morning served the office and ignored the notebook. That was a failure of management. That was my failure. I am sorry. I am not sorry the way a man is sorry when he wants the apology to be over. I am sorry the way a man is sorry when he has spent a week pretending to be invisible in his own house and has come back out the other side. Janelle's chest rose once and fell. She did not speak. She nodded. Just once. It was enough. Adele closed the laptop screen halfway. The projector dimmed. The natural morning light through the front windows of Magnolia and Sons began to compete with the wall sconces, the gray November sun rising over the rooftops on the east side of Greenwood Avenue. Will walked to the front door and unlocked it. He did not open it yet. He spoke without turning back to the room. 3 people are walking through that door in the next 20 minutes. I asked them to come because what happened in this building did not only happen to Janelle Boudreau. And the people who are also hurt deserve to say so in their own voices in front of you before any of you leaves this dining room today. He pulled the door open. Yolanda Carrington stood on the sidewalk in her lavender garden, her purse held with both hands, her pearl strand catching the early light. She had walked from her apartment on North Detroit Avenue, 6 blocks, in 23 minutes, because she had told Will on the phone last night that she was not going to be driven anywhere by anyone this morning. She wanted her feet on her own street when she said what she had to say. Will held the door for her. She did not look at him with any kind of gratitude. She looked at him with the steady, level look of a woman who had spent 41 years teaching kindergarten in this neighborhood and had decided somewhere around 2023 to stop being polite about being mistreated. He pulled out a chair at the head foretop. "Mrs. Carrington, thank you for coming." She nodded once. She sat. She set her purse on the chair beside her and folded her hands on the tablecloth, the same way she had folded them in church for 60 years. "Mr. Smith." Her voice was not loud, but it was not small either. "I knew your mother. Mabel and I were on the building committee at Vernon A.M.E. from 1991 until 2016. She used to tell me you were going to open a restaurant in Tulsa one day. I came to your opening in 2005. I have come here every Friday since the doors opened, except for the 3 months after my husband Hubert passed in 2019. The dining room did not move. I am 76 years old. 3 months ago, on a Friday, I have come to this restaurant every week of my life. I was made to wait in the host stand area for 25 minutes, while 4 white couples were seated ahead of me. 2 of them did not have reservations. I had a reservation. When I asked the young lady at the host stand whether there was a problem, she told me, and I am quoting her, "Maybe a bigger party place would suit you better. I am one person. I came alone. Hubert is gone." She paused. She did not waver. "I have spent." She opened her purse, took out a small spiral notebook, opened to a page she had bookmarked. "In this restaurant in 19 years, on Friday lunch and birthday dinners, and my granddaughter's college graduation in 2014, $18,462. I know because I keep a record. My husband taught me to keep a record of every dollar I spend in the world, because the world will not always keep one for you." She closed the notebook. "I did not come here for an apology, Mr. Smith. I came because you asked me to come, and because the woman in the corner over there," she looked at Janelle, "has put her hand on my shoulder every Friday for 5 years when I sit down, and asked me how my week was, and remembered the names of my grandchildren. I came because I wanted these young people in this room to look me in my face and understand what it means to make a customer feel small in a place that was built for her." Brianna was crying quietly into a cloth napkin. Tasha was looking at her hands. Yolanda did not soften. "I will come back to this restaurant, but not for you, Mr. Smith, for Janelle and for your mother." She stood. She tucked her purse under her arm. She walked the length of the dining room without rushing, paused at the framed photograph by the kitchen door, touched the bottom of the frame with the tips of 2 fingers, and walked out into the morning. The door closed behind her with a small jingle. Will did not speak for several seconds. Adele opened the door again. A young man in a denim jacket and a Tulsa Public Schools lanyard stepped in. Devonte Hayes was already standing against the side wall in his lined cook coat, but the man who walked in was someone else with the same surname. Devonte's older cousin, Marcellus Hayes, 28 years old, who had been a line cook in this kitchen from 2022 until May of 2026. Will gestured to a chair. Marcellus did not sit. He stood with one hand on the back of the chair like a man who was not sure how long he would be staying. "I worked here 3 years and 2 months." His voice was lower than expected and steadier than expected. "Brianna Holcomb called me boy to my face in front of 4 guests on a Tuesday lunch in March. I filed a complaint with Reginald the same afternoon. He told me to let him handle it internally. 2 weeks later, I started getting written up for tardiness I did not have. I have a stamped Magnolia and Sons time card for every shift I worked between January and May. I kept them in a manila envelope at my mother's house because she taught me the same thing Mrs. Carrington's husband taught her. Cornell Vaughn signed my termination on May 19th. I lost $18,400 in wages and my wife's prenatal coverage. My daughter was born July 7th. She was healthy, no thanks to this company." He did not move from behind the chair. Cornell looked at the floor. Reginald, for the first time all morning, raised his head and looked directly at Marcellus. There was something in his face that was not defense. It was the face of a man who had known all the way through and had said nothing. Will spoke quietly. "Marcellus, I want you to know 2 things before you leave today. The first is that your wages are being restored, with interest, by close of business Monday. The second is that the corporate kitchen training program in Memphis has an opening for assistant pastry chef at $64,000 a year. The position is yours if you want it. You do not have to answer me today. Adele will follow up with you Tuesday." Marcellus nodded once. He looked at Devonte. Devonte nodded back. He walked out. Adele looked at Will. Will nodded. She did not open the door this time. She turned, instead, toward Janelle, who was still sitting in her chair against the back wall, hands folded in her lap. "Janelle, will you come up here, please?" Janelle stood up. She did not rush. She walked across the dining room with the same economy of movement she used behind the line during a Saturday night cover of 210. She did not look at Brianna. She did not look at Cornell. She passed the framed photograph on the wall, paused for half a second the way she had paused all week without anyone understanding why, and then sat down at the foretop across from Will. Adele set a small black composition notebook on the table between them. Janelle opened it to the first dated entry, February 9th, 2025. The page was written in left-handed cursive with a steady downward slope. She read aloud, pecan-crusted catfish, buttermilk overnight, pecan crumb with brown sugar, smoked paprika, and a pinch of file. Cane syrup glaze finished with chili crisp, tested on family meal through 3 times this week. The line ate the whole pan. Submitted to Cornell Vaughn this morning. He said he would send it up. She turned the page. March 11th. No response yet. She turned the page. April 14th. Saw the menu mock-up in the manager's office. The dish is on the spring menu. My name is not on it. She closed the notebook. She looked up. She did not look at Will. She looked past him, at the photograph on the wall, at the woman with the silver hair in the peach church dress. I stopped writing my name on the new ones after that. I thought, if they can't see it, at least they can't take it. She paused. Her voice did not break. It softened. I came to work today because Wednesday morning, a quiet man in a Cubs cap walked into this kitchen and asked me where the bleach was, and 3 days later, he sat with me in the alley behind the dumpster and listened to me for 40 minutes about my grandmother. And then he asked me if I would let him photograph my notebook. So whatever happens next, Mr. Smith, what I want everyone in this room to know is that I did not write any of this down to be famous. I wrote it down because my grandmother told me when I was 11 years old that the only thing nobody can take from a black woman in a kitchen is what she keeps in her own hand. She placed her palm flat on the closed cover of the notebook. This is what I kept. The room held the silence for a long time. Will did not fill it. He did not need to. The notebook on the table between them was speaking louder than any board meeting ever had in 21 years of Magnolia and Sons. Will turned to Adele. Adele opened the leather portfolio and laid 4 manila folders side by side across the foretop, the same way she had laid them down at 653A. Before any employee had walked through the door. Each folder had a single name printed in black on the tab. Each folder contained the same set of documents inside. A termination letter signed by the chief operating officer in Chicago at 4:06 p.m. yesterday. A separation agreement, a list of contractual remedies retained by the company, and a list of mandated reporting obligations to outside agencies. Will did not raise his voice for any of what came next. He picked up the first folder. He walked it across the dining room to the seat where Cornell Vaughn was sitting. He set it down on the table in front of him. Cornell did not move to take it. Cornell. Effective at the end of this meeting, your employment with Magnolia and Sons Kitchen is terminated for cause. The cause is documented intellectual property fraud, suppression of employee complaints in conflict with company policy. Section 4.2. Violation of the Fair Labor Standards Act through your direct authorization of an unlawful tip pool and gross misuse of regional director authority. The $47,000 innovation bonus you received in October will be clawed back by the company through arbitration. Your case has been referred to the Wage and Hour Division of the United States Department of Labor, Dallas Regional Office, by Coltrane Ridge this morning at 6:06 a.m. The American Restaurant Association will receive notification of your termination and the basis for it by close of business Monday. They will decide whether to suspend your ServSafe Manager certification, which you renewed in January. That is their decision, not mine. Cornell finally picked up the folder. He did not open it. He stood up. He smoothed his jacket. He looked at Brianna for half a second, the look of an uncle who had been a father figure for 26 years and who now would not be one for the next 26. Then he turned and walked toward the front door. His Allen Edmonds wingtips made a small clean sound on the tile, the kind of sound that, in retrospect, his entire career had been built on. The door jingled twice. He was gone. Will picked up the second folder. He walked it to Brianna Holcomb. He set it down in front of her on the table, next to her sweating iced latte. Brianna looked at the folder. She did not pick it up. Her makeup had been crying down her cheeks for 40 minutes, and she was now sitting with the slow, deflated stillness of a person who had finally run out of words to talk her way out of a room. Will did not sit. He stood at the corner of her foretop, one hand resting on the back of an empty chair. Brianna, your employment is terminated effective at the end of this meeting for discriminatory customer profiling, for retention of an unlawful share of pooled tips for a period of 12 months, and for the verbal abuse of subordinate employees, including Marcellus Hayes. The aggregate amount of tips you retained beyond the lawful equal share, per Coltrane Ridge's calculation, is $22,418. That amount, plus liquidated damages of an equal amount, will be paid back to the affected employees as required by federal law, sourced from your remaining accrued compensation and, if needed, through wage garnishment by the Department of Labor. Your case is being referred separately. That is also not my decision. It is the law. Brianna's hands shook in her lap. She picked up the folder. She did not look up. Will walked back to the foretop, took the third folder, and brought it to Tasha Crenshaw. Tasha was already crying without sound. Will set the folder down. Tasha. Termination for the same cause as Ms. Holcomb, with the added documentation that the handwriting on the right-hand column of the customer profiling sheet was identified by Coltrane Ridge's forensic document examiner as a match for your handwriting on your November time-off requests. You are 24 years old. I want to say something to you before you leave this building. I am not going to pretend you are the worst person in this room. You are not. You followed someone older than you who knew better. That is not an excuse. It is a fact. The next job you take, you will choose differently. I hope you do. Tasha took the folder. Will walked back to Adele, picked up the fourth folder, and brought it to Reginald Mayfield. Reginald had been sitting with his palms flat on his knees for 46 minutes. He looked up when Will approached. Will did not sit down across from him. He stood beside him, the way a coach stands beside a player on the bench. Reginald, your folder is not a termination. It is a demotion to assistant general manager at our Oklahoma City location on Northwest Expressway, effective Monday. Your pay drops 28%. You will be on a 12-month performance improvement plan supervised by Mr. Cole, our new regional director of Southern Operations, who will be named Tuesday. You did not build this, but you stood in this dining room every day for 2 years and 3 months, and you watched it happen, and you said nothing. That is not a failure of character. It is a failure of management. I am giving you the chance to learn the difference. Do not make me regret it. Reginald nodded. His voice was hoarse. Yes, sir. Will turned to the rest of the room. 8 employees remained in chairs against the walls. The 4-line cooks, including Devante, 2 dishwashers, 1 barback, 1 hostess who had started 3 weeks ago and looked like she might pass out. Will pulled up a chair, turned it around, and sat down on it backwards, the way his father used to sit at the kitchen table in Bronzeville in 1983. For the rest of you, nothing changes about your jobs today except the ceiling above you. The following becomes policy across all 32 Magnolia & Sons locations effective 7 a.m. Monday. 1. Digital tip pool, transparent real-time, visible to every employee on a tablet at the host stand. Managers and supervisors do not participate, in compliance with federal law. 2. Every menu item created by an employee will carry that employee's name on the printed menu on the company app and in our marketing materials, plus a royalty of 1.5% of that item's revenue for the first 18 months. 3. A direct line to a third-party HR firm, Coltrane Ridge, reporting straight to my office in Chicago, bypassing regional directors entirely. Your complaint goes to a stranger in Houston before it goes to anyone you work with. 4. An undercover audit at a randomly selected location every 90 days. It could be me. It could be Adele. It could be a new hire in a Cubs cap. You will not know. That is the point. He paused. He turned, finally, to Janelle, who had not moved from the chair across the table. Janelle, I am not asking you to stay a stow chef. I am asking you to take a new position the board approved last night by emergency vote at 9:46 p. M. Director of Culinary Innovation, Magnolia and Sons Kitchen, reporting directly to me. Base salary $142,000 annually, plus full benefits plus retroactive royalties on the 3 menu items already on the menu, calculated by accounting at $84,310, wired to your account this afternoon. The position is based at headquarters in Chicago, but I have already approved a remote work arrangement, so you can stay in Tulsa with your grandmother in Lake Charles, a long weekend a month. The job is yours if you want it. You do not have to decide today. Janelle looked at him. She did not look surprised. She did not look overwhelmed. She looked like a woman who had spent 5 years writing the truth into a small black notebook because no one else would, and who was now being told that the company that had ignored that notebook had finally remembered how to read. She placed her hand on the notebook between them. She nodded once. I'll take it. 3 words. Steady. Will reached across the table. She met his hand halfway. The handshake lasted 3 seconds and meant 5 years. The dining room let out a breath it had been holding since 7:13 a.m. 3 months later. Saturday morning, February 20th, 2027. Greenwood Avenue. The snow that had fallen on Friday night had been swept off the sidewalk in front of Magnolia and Sons Kitchen by 6:15 a.m. The way it was now swept every morning by a part-time custodial worker named Marvin Booker, whose real name was Marvin Booker, who had been hired in December at a wage of $18 an hour with full benefits, who had been told by the new general manager that the cap and the polo were not required, but that the Cubs cap was strongly preferred. The general manager who told him this had laughed when she said it. Her name was Janelle Boudreau. She had been laughing more often since December. The front windows of the restaurant had been cleaned by a professional service every Wednesday since the first week of December. Inside, the dining room had not changed in any way that an outsider would notice. 84 chairs at 42 tables, the same dark wood floors, the same sconces. What had changed was the menu standing in the holder beside the host stand. The cover was still the same matte cream cardstock with the gold magnolia stamped at the top. The inside had a new line of small italic text beneath each item. Pecan-crusted catfish, cane syrup glaze, Chef Janelle Boudreau, Greenwood District. Sweet tea-brined pork belly, stone-ground grits. Chef Janelle Boudreau, Greenwood District, cane syrup, cornbread pudding. Chef Janelle Boudreau, Greenwood District. Smoked hen and andouille gumbo. Chef Marcellus Hayes, Memphis Flagship. Above the kitchen pass, the photograph that had hung beside the door since 2005 was still there. Beside it, a second photograph had been hung in December. A color photograph taken the morning of December 15th by Adele Whitmore on her own phone, showing the new Greenwood Kitchen Brigade, Janelle in the center, 4 line cooks beside her, 2 dishwashers, 2 pastry cooks, all in chef's coats, with their names embroidered in gold thread over the left chest pocket. At the bottom of the frame, in Janelle's handwriting, now transferred to a small brass plaque, 4 words: season with respect, always. The chalkboard easel beside the host stand carried the day's specials in white chalk, the bottom corner signed with a small JB. At 6:46 happy imp, the front door chimed. Otis Pemberton walked in. He wore the same tan wool coat with the worn collar. His hands were stiffer in February than they had been in November. He paused inside the door the way he had paused for the last 4 years, half expecting nothing, half hoping for the small thing he had stopped thanks for out loud. A young man behind the host's stand looked up. His name tag read Deshawn. He had been hired in January, 22 years old, from a culinary apprenticeship program at Tulsa Community College. Janelle had personally interviewed him. Mr. Otis, window booth, black coffee, hot, no sugar, cornbread coming up. Otis stopped. His shoulders did a thing they had not done in months. They dropped half an inch. Son, how do you know my name? Deshawn smiled, professionally and warmly at the same time, the way he had been trained for 2 weeks by Janelle herself. Chef Janelle told us about you on my first day. She said, "You are our most important guest. Booth is ready for you, sir." Otis walked to the window booth. He took off his coat slowly. He hung it on the hook with both hands. He sat down. He looked at the small ceramic vase in the center of the table, holding a single white carnation. He looked across the room at the door to the kitchen, where the framed photograph of the ribbon cutting hung. He looked back at the carnation. Then he put a $5 bill in the small ceramic tip jar on the table, a new jar hand-thrown by a potter in Sapulpa painted with magnolias instead of sunflowers, and tapped the rim of the jar twice the way. He tapped a door he was glad was open. Deshawn brought the coffee with both hands. At 11:31 a.m., the lunch crowd began. Yolanda Carrington came in at 12:04 with a friend from her church, a woman named Hattie Strickland, also in her 70s, who had not been to Magnolia in 19 years because she had once been seated next to the kitchen door at her own birthday luncheon. Yolanda had told her on Sunday that things were different now. Hattie had said she would believe it when she saw it. They were seated at table 7, the window booth 2, down from Otis. The hostess, a woman named Brielle, brought tea before either of them had asked. Hattie tasted hers. She nodded, slowly. Yolanda reached across the table and squeezed her friend's hand. That was all. At 12:14 p.m., the front door opened one more time. Will Smith walked in. He was not wearing a suit. He wore a charcoal sweater over a white tee, dark jeans, and the same brown work boots he had worn all of November. The Cubs cap was in his left hand, held at his hip. He looked the way a man looks when he has come home, not the way a man looks when he has come to inspect. Brielle started to walk toward him. Janelle, who had come out of the kitchen at exactly 12:13, the way she always did on Saturdays to walk the dining room, intercepted her gently with a hand on the shoulder. "I've got him, Brielle. Thank you." Janelle walked the length of the dining room, between the booths, past Yolanda and Hattie's table, past Otis at the window. She stood 2 feet from Will. She did not hug him. She did not bow. She held out her right hand. He took it. The handshake was the same handshake they had shared 3 months ago across the foretop after she had said 3 words. It lasted 3 seconds. Mr. Smith, Chef Boudreau. She led him to a small two-top in the corner near the kitchen, the table he had requested when he called the host stand last night. He sat. She did not give him a menu. She had already ordered for him the way he had told her he would not mind if she was willing. She walked back into the kitchen. 6 minutes later, she came out herself carrying a plate. Pecan-crusted catfish, cane syrup glaze, a small side of collards, and a square of cornbread pudding. She set the plate down in front of him with both hands, the way her grandmother in Lake Charles had taught her in 1998, the way Mabel Smith had taught Will at her own kitchen table in Bronzeville in 1979. Will looked at the plate. He picked up the fork. He took a bite. He chewed slowly. He looked across the dining room, past Otis at the window booth, past Yolanda squeezing Hattie's hand, past Deshawn pouring coffee at table 6, all the way to the framed photographs hanging beside the kitchen door. The photograph of a young man and his mother on September 17th, 2005, in front of a red ribbon that was about to be cut. He looked at the photograph for a long time. He finished the plate. Then he reached into his pocket, took out a folded napkin he had brought from home in Chicago, and laid it gently beside the empty plate. The napkin was older than the restaurant. The napkin was older than he was. It had belonged to his mother, hand-embroidered in 1971 by her own mother in Greenwood County, Mississippi, with a single magnolia in white thread on a square of pale linen. He had carried it in his pocket every day for 21 years, and he had never once placed it on a table in this building. He placed it now. He stood. He left a $40 tip in cash beside the napkin. He put the Cubs cap on his head. He walked the length of the dining room without rushing, paused at the framed photograph of his mother by the kitchen door, touched the bottom of the frame with the tips of two fingers the way Yolanda had touched it on her way out 3 months ago, and walked through the door into the February sunlight on Greenwood Avenue. The bell over the door jingled twice. This time, neither of them was a ghost. If this story reminded you that dignity is not something you earn by the clothes you wear or the title behind your name, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Every person you dismiss, every worker you overlook, every human being you treat as invisible carries a world you have never seen. Will Smith, or whoever you met in this story, is a reminder. Humility is not weakness. It is the mark of someone who has nothing left to prove. Like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications because the next story might change the way you see someone tomorrow. We'll see you then.